I remember the day my own son stood in front of me, eyes cold, and told me I was no longer capable of making sound decisions. He said it like a verdict, not a concern. And the strange part is, he believed it. Families don't always break with shouting. Sometimes they break with a signature on the wrong line. If you've ever been pushed aside by someone who claimed to care about you, tell me your story in the comments. I woke to a ceiling I didn't recognize, and the muted shuffle of people moving past a half-closed door. The sheet felt stiff, almost too clean, and a faint antiseptic trace clung to the room. A small plastic bracelet circled my wrist with a barcode, and my name, Arthur Hale. Tigard Elder Care. The words tightened something in my chest before the memory of the heart episode at Ochu flickered back, then vanished under a haze. A woman in scrubs checked a chart near my bed without fully meeting my eyes. Your son handled the admission, Mr. Hale. Everything is taken care of. Her tone carried that polite finality you hear when someone doesn't want questions. She went on about rest and recovery, about how paperwork could wait, and then moved to the next room. The phone on the side table had been switched to silent. A few notifications blinked, but several banking and ID cards were missing from my wallet. Only a couple remained. A stack of medical documents sat by the pillow, each page stamped and initialed in places, but the signature pretending to be mine felt off. The curve of the letters lacked weight, as if copied from memory by someone who never wrote slowly in his life. A call to Evan rang twice before skipping to voicemail. Another attempt ended the same way. Dad, I'm in the middle of something. I'll call when I can. His recorded greeting didn't match the situation. My thumb hovered over the screen, then slid the phone into my palm as a different nurse entered with a clipboard. She glanced at a form. There's a behavioral capacity evaluation scheduled later this week. Your family requested it. Just routine. Routine. The word echoed in a place already stretched thin. A quiet pulse gathered behind my ribs, not panic exactly, just the kind of awareness that comes when something doesn't align. Sitting up took effort, not from pain, but from uncertainty. Bits of the hospital corridor, the Gurney Evans shadow near the foot of my bed at Ochu, drifted through my mind without forming a full picture. Something about the transition from the hospital to here had been too quick, too smooth. Questions kept forming even as I kept them to myself. A man who spent his life troubleshooting infrastructure learns to observe before speaking. Years of field reports taught the value of studying a system for its weak points, and the same instinct rose now. Small details, the bracelet, the silent phone, the missing cards, the signatures. A slow breath steadied me. Feet touched the floor. The room felt like a holding area, not a place meant for long stays. Walking toward the door, I listened to distant conversations at the nurses' station, soft mentions of family concerns and monitoring compliance. The hallway waited bright and oddly busy for the hour. A cart rattled past, followed by a resident muttering to himself about misfiled prescriptions. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. The farther I moved from the bed, the clearer it became that whatever brought me here hadn't been an accident or misunderstanding. Every sign pointed to decisions made without me around me, possibly against me. A staff member hurried by with a stack of forms, nearly bumping my shoulder. She offered a distracted apology and disappeared into another wing. The moment passed, leaving only the low hum of conversations I couldn't quite catch. My hand brushed the wall as I kept walking, trying to piece together what little I knew and what much I didn't. The need for answers pushed me forward, away from the bed, away from the hollow reassurance of strangers. The corridor stretched ahead, a line of open doors and passing staff, and no one seemed to question why I stepped into it. Calls went out as I kept moving down the hallway, each one meant to ground me in something familiar. My sister answered first. "Evan's taking care of you, Arthur. Don't work yourself up. No question about why I was there or whether I agreed to any of it." She repeated the line as if reading from a script, then excused herself because guests were coming. Another relative picked up, paused long enough to sigh, then said almost the same thing. "He's doing what's best. Just rest and let him sort things out." A third call ended with, "You shouldn't stress your heart arguing." Not one person asked, "Do you want to be there?" That absence said more than any comforting tone. A staff member approached while I was finishing the last call, holding a form, with the kind of polite sympathy used for people who aren't expected to debate. "Mr. Hale. This came through our internal system. Your son provided your recent medical history and requested a behavioral capacity evaluation. It's nothing unusual after a cardiac episode." Her calm phrasing clashed with the accusation inside the document episodes of confusion following hospitalization. That was the first time anyone had suggested something like that. My hand stayed steady, even as the words took their time settling in. Rumors travel fast in families, faster in communities where people think they know your weaknesses. A cousin sent a text saying he'd heard about my decline and hoped I wasn't living alone anymore. Another message popped up with a prayer emoji and a line about accepting help when age catches up. Age catching up. That was a new one. A sense of tightening spread, not panic, just the understanding that a story had begun circulating without me. A story built on concern, shaped by half-truths, and strengthened by repetition. Those loops of assumed kindness can trap a person quicker than open hostility. Before deciding what to do next, the phone vibrated again. This time the name on the screen brought a small, grounding weight. Marcellus Grant. "Did you sign anything at OHSU?" His voice carried the same solid tone it always had, the one he used on emergency calls during his fire service days. I told him no, nothing beyond standard discharge papers. "Then don't let anyone rush you. Paper trails tell the truth. Make sure you get yours." That call cut through the noise like a clean line. Once it ended, the hallway felt different, less like a place I had to endure, and more like a place I needed to navigate. Quiet steps carried me toward the administrative office near the back of the building. A receptionist glanced up when I approached. "Good morning, sir. Are you looking for someone? I need copies of every document with my name on it. Admissions, transfers, evaluations, anything that came from my family." Her expression shifted into something between surprise and caution. People don't usually ask for records unless something has gone wrong. "It might take a moment. Please have a seat." Time passed slowly as she printed, sorted, stapled, and rechecked each page. Nearby staff greeted each other, compared schedules, and talked about errands, none of it touching the unease I carried. A resident in a sweater too large for him shuffled by, muttering about lost keys. A tray of unopened mail sat behind the counter. The receptionist returned with a folder thick enough to require 2 hands. "Here you go. Everything we have so far. Let us know if you need clarification." The weight of the documents settled into my grip. Back at a small table near the window, I started opening the folder. The first few sheets covered the transfer from OHSU, but deeper in the stack, the handwriting shifted. Some signatures, supposedly mine, leaned sideways, missing the pressure I naturally leave on paper. Lines describing my mental state stretched longer than they should, embellished with words like disorientation, inconsistent recollection, lack of clarity during conversation. Another page listed behaviors no one had ever observed in me, misplacing items repeatedly, forgetting familiar names, needing direction during basic tasks. Whoever wrote it had confidence enough to create a picture that would look plausible to anyone who didn't know me well. A quick scan revealed several forms marked with Evan's contact information as primary family representative. His name appeared next to checkboxes authorizing evaluations and communication between medical providers. One note mentioned he was concerned about his father's judgment regarding financial decisions post-hospitalization. The breath that left me wasn't anger or shock, more a slow exhale of understanding. If I didn't challenge this trail now, the record would harden into truth. People believe paper. Institutions believe signatures. And families often believe the person who speaks the loudest or moves the fastest. A final document at the back held the most telling detail, a request for expedited review due to patient vulnerability. The handwriting wasn't mine. The phrasing wasn't mine. The story definitely wasn't mine. A chair scraped the floor nearby as someone sat, the ordinary sound blending into the steady hum of printers and conversation. The day around me continued unbothered, while the folder stayed open under my hand. The folder stayed open on my lap a while before a detail on the bottom half of a page pulled my attention. A temporary authorization appeared near the middle, granting limited decision-making rights to the family representative. The signature, pretending to be mine, dipped sharply to the left, a habit Evan had as a kid when he forged hall passes. The moment registered as a small jolt, not dramatic, just the kind that changes the rhythm of breathing. A knock on the door. A caregiver I hadn't met before stepped inside, carrying a tray with a paper cup and 2 pills. She leaned slightly toward me, lowering her voice. "Your family told us you can get worked up easily. We've been asked not to let you keep your phone too long." Her words weren't unkind, but the message beneath them landed with precision. "Who said that?" She hesitated, then offered a practiced half-smile. "It was mentioned during your intake. I don't want trouble for anyone." Once she left, the room felt smaller. The phone sat in my hand like a piece of evidence. A swipe across the screen triggered a voicemail that must have been recorded days earlier. Evan's voice came through with the tone he used whenever he wanted to sound mature. "Dad, you really need to rest. I'm handling everything. The house situation needs to be wrapped up soon. We don't have much time." The last part lingered, a stray thread that didn't belong in a message from a son checking on his father. A faint unease crept up the back of my neck. Maybe the heart episode had blurred a few hours. Maybe I'd agreed to something without remembering clearly. The thought slipped in the way self-doubt often does. Years of working around pressure systems and emergency repairs taught me to trust logic, but medical events can muddle even the steady-minded. That possibility pressed in harder than I wanted to admit. Attempts to call Evan again met with quick rejections. A short text arrived minutes later. "Dad, stop calling. Trust me for once." For once, the words carried weight, as if all the years of raising him, guiding him, pushing him toward stability had somehow turned into a single accusation. Rather than keep dialing, the instinct to document things surfaced. A slow, methodical process followed. Pages were photographed, one by one, each image attached to an email draft addressed to myself, saved and unsent until the connection stabilized. Not much of a rebellion, but it gave shape to the need to keep something in my hands. A brief message went out to Marcellus, using a secondary email he'd set up for me years ago after a minor scam incident. "Need your eyes on some signatures. Something feels off." His reply arrived later. "Send everything. I'll check against your old forms." While scanning the next batch of pages, the phone buzzed again. A neighbor from Selwood, the kind who always waved when watering his front yard, sent a short note. "Saw a moving truck outside your place on Saturday. Didn't know you were relocating." A second message followed. 2 guys loading boxes. Didn't look familiar. Thought you hired help. The room steadied around me, not in a calming way, but in the way a structure settles before revealing its damage. Those tiny confirmations from the outside world, just enough to shift the ground, made something clear. The timeline wasn't matching anything I remembered. Items couldn't be moving out of my house if I hadn't arranged it. My belongings shouldn't be handled by strangers while I lay recovering. The order I'd built my life on, the routines that once seemed indestructible, began to slide out of formation. Half my identity came from reliability, the engineer who never missed a maintenance report, the father who paid every bill on time, the man who always knew where his keys were. If the narrative around me was changing that image without my consent, it meant someone had already moved several steps ahead. During the next hour, the folder was reviewed again, more slowly this time. Margins, initials, dates, anything that might explain the disconnect. A few lines about declining spatial awareness stood out. Another note mentioned impaired judgment regarding property decisions. Both comments contradicted conversations I'd had with doctors at Ochu, none of whom seemed concerned about anything other than my heart. Thumbs scrolled through my saved voicemails until one recording caught my attention. It was older, buried behind dozens of routine check-ins from the past year. The clip started mid-sentence. "Don't worry about the house anymore, Dad. I'll take care of everything. You just focus on resting." At the time he'd said it, the sentence probably sounded like support. Hearing it now in the middle of forged signatures and secret evaluations carried an entirely different weight. The recording kept playing while my hand rested on the edge of the table, the paper beneath it shifting slightly as a draft moved through the hallway. Footsteps approached from behind, steady and quick, the kind of stride Evan used whenever he was preparing an argument. He appeared in the doorway without warning, holding a folder as if it were a ticket I was expected to take. No greeting. No, "How are you doing, Dad?" Just a direct thrust of papers into my hands. "Sign these so I can handle everything. We don't have time to drag this out." The pages rustled against my palms. Behavioral capacity evaluation. Release of decision-making authority. A checklist of symptoms someone had assigned to me without ever speaking to me. Evan watched with an impatience that didn't bother hiding itself. The folder closed under my fingertips. "I'm not signing anything. No need to raise my voice." The refusal landed clearly. His jaw tightened in response. "Dad, you're making this harder than it needs to be." He glanced around the room as if expecting witnesses, then leaned in. "The house is already sold. The buyers are moving their things into storage until we finish the paperwork. We can't risk delays." The words hit harder than anything he'd said up to that point. A lifetime of decisions, repairs, mortgage payments, and memories reduced to a casual update. "Sold. Yes, it's done. Stop fighting this." The tone carried frustration, not remorse. Something hollowed out in my chest as the pieces arranged themselves, forged signatures, missing cards, moving trucks, now a done deal presented as fact. "Show me the contract." He avoided my eyes, rummaged through the folder with exaggerated irritation, then shrugged. "I don't have it on me. You'll see it later. Trust me." Trust me. The same phrase used in every message, every deflection. The same phrase that had once meant something long before responsibility turned into burden for him. A staff member entered with a blood pressure cuff slowing when she saw us. "Oh, Mr. Hale, I was just coming to check your vitals. Your son mentioned you might be feeling confused about your finances." The sentence came out lightly, but it carried another truth beneath it. Evan had already set the narrative here. He'd painted me as someone lacking clarity, someone who needed oversight. Her comment slipped into me with a cold precision. Whatever this was, it wasn't a misunderstanding or a son overwhelmed by stress. It had steps, preparation, and intention. Evan's posture stiffened, as if he feared she'd said too much. "Dad, don't start doubting everything. Just sign the forms so we can move forward." He tried to nudge the papers back toward me. The refusal came again. No. A simple answer, but enough to shift the air between us. His eyes hardened, the entitlement behind them no longer masked. You're not thinking straight. I'm thinking clearly enough to know when something isn't right. For a moment, neither of us spoke. A faint announcement echoed down the corridor, a reminder for staff about afternoon rounds. The sound passed without either of us reacting. Evan snapped the folder shut. I can't keep fixing everything alone. If you won't cooperate, then you're making this worse for everyone. He left without waiting for a reply, the edge in his steps saying more than the words he threw over his shoulder. Once he disappeared around the corner, the nurse lingered near the doorway, fiddling with her equipment. He told us you shouldn't make big decisions right now, that you're under stress after the hospital stay. Her tone softened. If you ever feel unsure, Mr. Hale, you can request a review of your file. You don't have to sign anything without understanding it. That small bit of honesty gave me room to breathe. The system around me was bending, but not fully collapsed. A call to Marcellus connected after 2 rings. He came in, yes. Did he push paperwork? Hard. A pause followed the kind where someone pieces together a map of what isn't being said. Don't stay there another night. Get the documents, ask for administrative discharge, and meet me outside. The plan formed quickly. Request my records, insist on my right to leave, and contact a lawyer before Evan produced more surprises. Each step settled into place without emotional flourish, just the calm of someone who'd spent decades troubleshooting crises. The walk to the administrative wing felt longer than it was. Staff passed by with clipboards and stacks of linens, none of them paying much attention. My request for discharge paperwork surprised the receptionist, but she complied after confirming my identity twice. 10 minutes later, the folder of documents thicker than before was handed over. No speeches came to mind, no dramatic vow or declaration. Just movement step after step toward the exit. Outside the sliding doors, the air carried the faint sounds of cars rolling along the main road. I stood there holding the folder tight enough for the edges to press into my fingers, thoughts shifting through everything that had just unfolded. The feeling wasn't shock or anger, not yet. The phone vibrated as I stepped off the curb, the number unfamiliar but local. A hesitant voice greeted me. Arthur, it's Ben, from Selwood. Ben had lived across the street for 20 years, the kind of neighbor who loaned tools and never returned them on time. I didn't want to bother you, he went on, but someone from a real estate agency was walking through your place a few weeks back. I figured you were planning a sale. He paused, as if weighing whether to continue. Didn't know you were moving so soon. A short breath left me before I could respond. I wasn't. Then you should check on that, he murmured. Something didn't feel right. The call ended with an awkward goodbye, leaving a knot of certainty forming where confusion had been. A real estate agent entering my house weeks before the alleged sale. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That meant planning. A dark pickup pulled alongside the sidewalk. Marcellus lowered the window. Get in, we're heading downtown. Lewis cleared some time for you. He didn't phrase it like a suggestion. The drive into Portland moved in silence until he asked, Notice anything missing from the file? My consent. He nodded once. Then you're doing the right thing? Paper can be forged, but patterns don't lie. Lewis's office sat in an older brick building near the river. A receptionist ushered us in, and Lewis, a compact man with careful gestures, waited behind his desk. Mr. Hale Martellus filled me in. Let's take a look. The folder landed between us. He flipped through the pages, pausing at the temporary authorization, then studying the signature with a frown. You didn't sign this. No. And this isn't your handwriting. He tapped the page lightly. Whoever attempted this didn't understand how signatures degrade under stress. They tried to imitate your neat form, but the baseline isn't yours. He continued scanning through the transfer notes, marking sections with tabs. This other document. Limited power of attorney. Suspicious. The witness signature is missing a timestamp and the notary field is blank. That alone could nullify the entire thing. A faint memory surfaced Evan bringing me a few documents after the insurance company changed policies last year. He once asked for my signature on something about medical coverage. I didn't look closely. The recollection sharpened as I spoke. The lettering in those papers resembled this. Same tilt, same spacing. Lewis leaned back. If he replicated your signature and used it to transfer authority, the transaction is vulnerable. You may be looking at forgery, fraud, and misrepresentation. Depending on how far he went, this could rise to criminal investigation. The words fell methodically without drama, but their weight settled into the room. Marcellus crossed his arms. So the sale can be undone. If it relied on unauthorized signatures, yes. But we need to gather additional evidence before challenging the transfer. Any digital correspondence, messages, call logs. He looked to me. And you must stay calm. Acting rashly will only strengthen his narrative. Calm wasn't difficult. Years of engineering taught me how to compartmentalize. That discipline rose now like an old muscle memory. What's next? Documentation? All of it. Don't confront him directly. Let the record speak. Paper trails never panic. They never lie. The meeting ended without ceremony. Outside, the traffic along the boulevard hummed steady and indifferent. Marcellus stayed beside me as we walked back to the truck. Don't let him corner you, he said. These things escalate when people feel their control slipping. Keep your movements precise. Keep your proof organized. Advice rooted in a lifetime of dealing with emergencies. Direct, simple, solid. The phone buzzed again while we were still in the parking lot. A new email sent to several relatives, many of whom hadn't spoken to me in months. The message stung, not because it was cruel, but because of its calculated kindness. Dad's been unstable since the heart incident. He's confused, forgetful, and some people are taking advantage of him. Please reach out to support me while I try to handle everything alone. Another line read, He's being influenced by outsiders and refusing help. The phrasing was deliberate. He wasn't just protecting himself, he was shaping the battlefield. By the time anyone asked my side, they'd already absorbed his version. A few minutes later, his name flashed across the screen. Dad, what are you doing? His voice held that familiar softness he used before breaking bad news. You don't have to push back this hard. You're making it rough on everyone. Stop involving strangers. Don't work against your family. And please, don't fight me on this. It's not good for you. There was no anger, only pressure, smooth, practiced, confident. Evan, I need clarity. Know what you need is rest. Let me handle the details. Don't make this a bigger issue. Then the line dropped. Marcellus watched me slide the phone back into my pocket. He's tightening the net, he said. That's what people do before a major move. The rest of the afternoon passed in measured tasks. At a borrowed table in a temporary apartment he helped me secure. The laptop opened with a familiar chime. Files uploaded. Photos arranged. Notes typed in clean bullet points. Screenshots saved twice, once locally, once in cloud storage. Every document found its place in a new folder labeled Plainly Record. No emotional flourishes, no declarations, just organization step by step, fact by fact. The cursor blinked in the corner as another file entered the archive, and the room's quiet deepened into something steady. Lewis spread the documents across his desk, arranging each sheet with deliberate care. His hand hovered over the hospital records first, then the transfer notes from the elder facility, Then the invoices connected to the men who hauled items from my place. "These entries don't align," he remarked while tracing a date with his pen. A brief nod from Marcellus confirmed the pattern we had started to uncover. Nothing matched cleanly, as if someone tried to stitch a story together without knowing how the pieces fit. The next hour became an exercise in sorting truth from fabrication. Lewis cross-checked signatures. Marcellus compared timestamps. My part was simply confirm what actually happened versus what had been created on paper. Each inconsistency strengthened the same conclusion: this wasn't a mix-up. It was construction brick by brick. We stepped out of his office once the files had been organized into labeled envelopes. Marcellus offered a ride back to Selwood so I could check the property from a distance. No conversation filled the ride. There was no need. The truck rolled to a stop near the old corner store, and my place stood several houses down. The yard looked stripped of character. Tools I once kept near the porch were gone, and the familiar planter beds had been cleared out. A new lock hung on the front door, the kind installed by property managers who don't care about aesthetics, only control. Whatever personality the house once had seemed scraped clean, leaving little trace of the years woven into it. My stomach didn't twist. Panic didn't rise. A steadier frame took over. Images were taken from various angles. A short line of notes recorded what had changed, and when neighbors first noticed unfamiliar trucks. That methodical approach: collect, classify, preserve, had guided me through engineering crises for decades. It returned now with unnerving ease. Lewis encouraged another step. "We need the official transaction record. Get a certified copy from the county office. If anything got manipulated along the chain, it will show up there." He gave instructions for which forms to request and how to verify the clerk's seal. His confidence lent structure to the uncertainty. Back at the temporary unit, Marcellus arranged for me. The phone buzzed with an unlisted number. Only one line appeared in the text: "Stop while you can." No signature, no context. Just that warning. The kind of message meant to unsettle rather than inform. A faint unease slid through me. Not fear, but awareness that Evan's maneuvering had attracted others. Whoever sent that didn't want me pulling at certain threads. Marcellus scanned the message and muttered, "Someone's nervous." He stepped toward the parking area and returned a moment later, brow tightened. "Gray sedan by the dumpster. Didn't follow us here earlier. Keep your blinds angled tonight." Another buzz drew my attention to the laptop. An email from Evan filled the screen. "Dad, you're not well. This stress isn't good for you. If you insist on making trouble, I'll have no choice but to request temporary guardianship. Please stop before things reach that point." He dressed it in concern, but the meaning underneath was force. Guardianship meant total control: finances, housing, medical decisions. The threat was clear: back off, or lose whatever autonomy remained. The cursor blinked while I reread the message. No response came to mind, and none was needed. Lewis's advice replayed: stay measured, keep records, let evidence speak. Anger would only strengthen Evan's claims. Detachment served better than outrage. A methodical rhythm took over again. Emails saved, screenshots archived, notes added to the growing log. Every step aimed toward clarity, not vengeance. People break things when they rush. They win when they prepare. The folder from the elder facility remained unopened on the small table beside the couch. Its edges had softened from handling, but one corner held a slight bulge. Pulling it free revealed a folded sheet tucked between discharge papers. Something about the placement felt intentional, as though whoever filed it hoped I wouldn't notice. The header read, "Behavioral Evaluation Request. Pending family authorization." Below it, a single line designated the required signature for permission to proceed. The handwriting was easy to identify Evans. Bold, confident strokes. No hesitation. My thumb pressed against the paper while I read the note again, tracing the space where my own consent should have been. The room around me settled into a steady hum of routine sounds. The refrigerator cycling on a car rolling past the building Marcellus, pacing near the door as he made a call. The sheet balanced lightly between my fingers as I studied the signature, a final time, the realization deepening with every second. The email from the elder facility arrived just after dawn, its timestamp still blinking when I opened it. Mr. Hale, please sign the attached behavioral capacity evaluation at your earliest convenience. This request was initiated by your son. No greeting beyond that. No explanation. Just the assumption I would comply. Before I could finish reading, the phone rang. Lewis didn't bother with pleasantries. We have an issue. The buyers are pushing hard. They claim their belongings are already in temporary storage and want confirmation from you to finalize the transfer. They're threatening legal action if you delay. His voice stayed even, but the tension behind it gathered like a strain in the line. Don't sign anything, he added. Not one thing. Another call came through before the screen dimmed. A cousin from Ohio, breathless, as if she'd sprinted to the phone. Evan says you're stirring trouble. Let him handle things, Arthur. You're creating unnecessary drama. Her tone mirrored everyone else's from the past week concern, mixed with condescension. Emotion wrapped inside a script someone had clearly handed them. More calls followed. A brother-in-law, a niece I barely spoke to, all repeating the same message. Let Evan take care of you. You're making this harder than it needs to be. He's only trying to help. The chorus wore the same rhythm, the same pacing as if rehearsed. A new vibration signaled a text. Evan's name lit up. If you fight me, things will get worse. You're not well enough for this. The certainty in his words carried a different weight than before. Not just pressure possession. That belief children sometimes develop when they convince themselves their interpretation of a parent outweighs the parent's own voice. Hands trembled slightly as the phone lowered onto the table, though the shaking didn't match panic. Something quieter took over, a strange clarity, the kind that comes when a person finally recognizes the size of the storm they're in. If I signed the evaluation, Evan would gain legal access to every decision I made. If I stayed silent, the sale could move forward on forged authority. Either direction led to losing everything. A chair waited beside the small dining table in the temporary apartment. Sitting felt like the only sensible next step. The documents spread out in front of me, fanned in loose stacks. The forged authorization. The elder facility notes, screenshots of messages, emails Evan sent behind my back, the voicemail hinting at the house sale, the neighbor's report about strangers moving boxes from my home. All different threads, but when placed together, the shape of the pattern became unmistakable. Lewis called again. You have enough to file a formal complaint. This goes beyond a family dispute. We're moving into criminal territory. Marcellus paced by the window, watching the parking lot. You need to move now, before he launches something bigger. The noise of the morning settled into a low hum around me. A few breaths later, calm replaced the tremor in my hands. Years of engineering had trained me for crisis to focus on the structure, not the noise around it. The structure here was simple: gather, verify, act. Every file went into a thick envelope. Notes were tucked in alongside the evidence. The steps to the door felt steady and unhurried. Marcellus drove without speaking, stopping only when the county building came into view. A few people waited on the sidewalk, shuffling papers, sipping drinks, dealing with their own battles. Nothing special about the scene, which made the next steps easier. Inside, a clerk motioned me forward. How can I help you today? The envelope slid across the counter. I need to submit a formal complaint regarding a fraudulent property transaction and unauthorized medical evaluations. She opened the flap, and skimmed the first page. Her expression shifted as she reached the forged authorization form. "This looks serious. Let me get someone from investigations." She disappeared into a side office, while the room settled into its usual rhythm: printers, running phones, ringing footsteps, crossing tile floors. Lewis had taught me long ago, during a minor dispute over a boundary line, that institutions move slowly but precisely when given the right information. A man in a county badge approached moments later. "Mr. Hale?" "Yes." "I'm going to review this now." "Please wait a moment." He stepped aside and started reading, working page by page, each one handled with increasing attention. His eyes flicked between the signatures and the supporting documents. He paused at the neighbor's statement, then at the screenshots, then at the elder facility's notes, showing evaluations requested without my consent. A small frown formed. He kept reading. Marcellus leaned against the wall behind me. Neither of us said anything. Speaking would have broken the fragile stillness of the moment. The investigator reached the final page, the forged signature, granting Evan permission to evaluate my mental capacity, and rested his thumb against it. His gaze lifted from the paper to my face, holding there for a moment. Not unkind, not accusatory, just measuring the gravity. "Mr. Hale..." He didn't finish, not yet. The next steps required his own process, his own assessment. He looked down again, returned to the stack, and continued reading, preparing to move the situation into the next phase. The investigator called 3 days later. His tone carried none of the hesitation he'd shown when we first met at the counter. "Mr. Hale, the county has placed an immediate hold on the property transfer. Nothing will proceed until our review is complete. Also, the elder facility has been instructed to pause all evaluations connected to your file." He continued listing procedural steps, but the essentials were enough. The machinery Evan set in motion had finally stopped turning. A notification arrived that same afternoon. Evan had been summoned to give a formal statement. The email wasn't sent to me, but Lewis forwarded it with a short note. "The process is underway. Stay steady." Marcellus stopped by with groceries and a few tools to help secure the apartment. "They're taking you seriously now," he said while setting the bags on the counter. Even as the investigation unfolded, a softer fear rose without warning. It wasn't about losing the house or the money. Those could be rebuilt. What stung deeper was the possibility that my own son saw me not as a person, but as an obstacle to maneuver around. That thought pressed heavier than anything he forged, sold, or manipulated. A familiar line echoed in my memory, one an old supervisor used often. "The people closest to you can forget you're human when they benefit from thinking otherwise." The truth of it settled with a kind of acceptance I hadn't reached before. Calls from relatives slowed once news of the investigation spread. Some offered awkward apologies. Others pretended they'd never doubted me. And a few shifted their questions toward Evan, asking what he'd been thinking, why he'd made decisions behind everyone's backs. Whatever control he once held in that circle had already begun to unravel. None of this brought satisfaction. Just confirmation. Nothing about this required confrontation, so I gave him no message, no meeting, no explanation. Distance did what dialogue couldn't, clarified who stood where. The lease for a small unit in northeast Portland came through quickly. The place didn't have much in it, except a table, a few chairs. That first night, I assembled a basic bed frame, tightened screws, and checked the level on the legs out of habit. The rhythm soothed more than I expected. Lewis helped me navigate part-time consulting work with a non-profit that built water systems for rural communities. A modest role, just reviewing structural plans and pointing out flaws, but purposeful. The team appreciated the experience. I appreciated the structure. Work that didn't require defending myself felt like a luxury. Weeks passed in unremarkable patterns. Mornings began with coffee from the corner store. Afternoons belonged to the non-profit's project updates. Evenings were spent unpacking boxes or fixing small things around the apartment the way a person reclaims space inch by inch. One message from Evan eventually came through, longer than usual. Apologies layered on explanations, excuses mixed with half-admissions. He wrote about stress-fear responsibility he wasn't ready for. He asked for forgiveness, then asked for a chance to talk. The email sat unread for several days after I first opened it. There was nothing to add, no reply that would fix what had already been revealed. Silence held its own boundary. On a Saturday morning, a single box remained unopened. Inside lay an old map of Oregon I'd kept for decades, creases worn from years of folding and unfolding it during road trips with my wife. Then, later, with Evan. The map had somehow survived the moving trucks, the forged signatures, and the attempted sale. A small miracle, or maybe just something forgotten by the people who had rushed through my house without knowing what mattered. The wall above the desk had an empty stretch that suited it. A few nails and a level were all I needed. The map unfurled slowly, showing counties, rivers, and the uneven lines that marked the routes I used to take. Hanging it wasn't sentimental. It simply made the room mine. The apartment settled into a quiet rhythm once the map was in place. Not triumphant, not symbolic, just steady. The kind of steadiness that returns when nothing is pulling at you anymore.